Wilson Alexander, the man himself. Good evening, good sir. And he's got, look at this hat. Look at this hat. You're wearing your own hat here, Wilson.
Personal branding, right? You know, it's we're in
Company
Houston.
after you.
I like to say so, but I don't see a dime of the profits, so I guess not. But it's fun. You know, there's a Wilson store in the Galleria in Houston, and it's kind of fun, like just seeing what's in there. You're like, oh, it's my own personal store.
I mean, that would be pretty neat. I mean, you could just buy like a whole thing of tennis balls, and just put it right behind you, like the whole thing, the whole 9 yards. I got a great idea for a new studio for you and you guys and the stuff that you guys are doing. You can have Wilson all over there. Free branding. They can't take that away from you, man. That's all I'm saying.
My dad jokes that they should have named my younger brother Spalding.
Well, or what's the football? What are footballs? What's the football brand name? Rydell.
Yeah, that'd be good. I say they should have named him Nike if you wanted to get like really high quality stuff. But he's like, that's a weird name. I'm like, well, so is Spalding. But okay. Anyway, we digress.
Very true. Wilson, good to have you in here, man. Look, I'm going to leave this open-ended. I'm glad that you're joining us here. We had you on in the preseason, and now that the season's kind of come to an end here, what was your thoughts of just the entire season? Good, bad, and different. Did you feel that LSU, what happened this season, was about what you expected, a little better, a little below? When you look at this season all in a bow, how do you see it from on field?
A little bit below expectations, but not like all that drastically below. And frankly, I mean, my personal thought going into the year was 9-3. So to go 8-4 is just a little bit below that. This felt like a team watching the preseason that had too many question marks, some deficiencies in spots. I think they were pretty well coached, particularly on the defensive side. That I was really impressed by the growth that they showed from last year. It was not an eyesore throughout the season. So you got better there, but there's still a ways for this team to go to get to where it needs to be on an annual basis. They're still, in that second tier of SEC teams going into next season, and they've got to break out of that because they've been stuck there now for a few years. And going 8-4, 9-3, all that stuff isn't good enough. But it's not all that far off from, frankly, what I expected just watching this team kind of when we would get to see them in the preseason and just kind of how things were coming off of last year.
Did you think things were getting bad during that 3-game stretch, that 3-game loss?
Oh, yeah. I mean, gosh, the offense averaged like 17 points per game during that 3-game losing streak, and things did not look good. So, yeah, I was impressed, too, by the ability of it's a small thing that people I don't care about because it's like, okay, what are you really salvaging here? But to finish 8-4 and to win your last 2 after that 3-game losing skid, was a good way for this team to end the year. Actually, win your last 3 straight, including the bowl game, even with all the opt-outs. Right. So, yeah, things were looking pretty rough there, especially on the offensive side. And I still feel like Brian Kelly at least needs to make an evaluation on that side of the ball, decide kind of what he wants to do there. But, and then at least give it a good, long, hard look. If he still wants to keep everything in place, that's understandable. But at least give it a look because that 3-game losing streak was tough. That was surprising on the offensive side how much of a step back they took there.
And you had 2 guys that have left already on the offensive side of the ball that are going to be coordinators and play callers at other places. Now, I know that Fitch went to Charlotte and Slade went to Houston. So you have a deficiency at an on-field position coach. If it happened today and you had to put all your chips in on what happens here, do you have any leaning on what you think will happen at tight end?
At tight end coach?
Yeah, because and not only that, I think even from a support staff situation. I mean, look, man, Fitch was the one on the sidelines with Garrett the entire time. You don't hand that role out lightly if you're an OC. So, I mean, just like if you had to lean maybe where they go, not person, but I just mean style of what you think that they do.
I haven't given it that much thought really in terms of style. I mean, so Todd Fitch coming in, obviously he had a lot of experience as an offense coordinator, prior relationship with Joe Sloan. It seemed like a good guy to bring in going into Joe's first year as the OC. They also brought in Trey Holtz, who was directly working with the quarterbacks too. And so in Todd's role was a little bit, yeah, he had a lot of quarterback experience. He could bounce around if they kind of need him to, but I think he was mostly with the quarterbacks. I would imagine you probably, though, kind of lean on Trey, or maybe you go out and try to find another analyst who can help you in some way. Maybe you want someone else with play calling experience. Because like you said, Slade had some play calling experience. So did Todd Fitch. And so I wouldn't be surprised if LSU goes to try and find an analyst with some of that just for another voice in the room, another opinion, another set of eyes on things as they continue to kind of round out that support staff of things. And as for tight ends coach, though, I don't know that you'll necessarily find someone who has play calling experience at tight ends coach. And I don't know that it's that necessary really going into next season.
I don't either. I mean, the only thing is that clearly, obviously, the big connection that every fan makes, at least on this show, they're going to probably ask at some point during here is the whole Tommy Rees being a tight end coach at Cleveland thing, right? Like that's been probably the number one question that we've gotten the entire time. I don't know. But what I do know is that, Wilson, you bring in Bauer Sharp, you bring in, or you see what Trey Green can be, at least the surface level. And I'm like, man, I'm going after anybody that can develop at tight end because that 1-2 punch can be lethal if you do the right things with it. Maybe I see a really good path for that room if you hire the right guy to help develop. Do you feel that as well there?
Oh, yeah. I'm in lockstep with you on that one because Bauer Sharp is also someone who really needs development. I mean, this is the guy who was playing quarterback a few years ago at Southeastern and talking to – and he's done some good things as a tight end, but he needs to get good coaching. He needs to have somebody who can make sure that he's consistent. That's kind of the talk, reaching out to an Oklahoma reporter right after he signed with LSU, just like, what? Okay, so what's the deal with this guy? He said when he hits people, he can be really, really physical, but sometimes he whiffs and sometimes there's drops, and he just really needs good coaching and in order to kind of take that next step into being a complete tight end that doesn't have some of those inconsistencies because he hasn't played the position for really that long of a time in college. And Trey does in a lot of the same respects. I mean, he was kind of a wide receiver in high school. Obviously, we saw him play more so receiver this year as a freshman. But he showed you what he can be in that bowl game. And so you've got two guys here who really just need to get consistent, need good coaching. And so finding someone who is a proven sort of tight ends developer should be the priority there.
I agree with you. What have you thought about speaking of, because we talked about the portal, what have you thought about what they've done in the portal? I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. I don't know where to even start even asking these questions anymore. I guess when you look at it as a whole, the number one class on 247, I guess, how do you see that it's been going for LSU?
I see it from a sort of 30,000-foot view. They have filled the holes that they had on their roster going into next season, and that they have been able to get a lot of the top guys in the portal at positions of need. But frankly, we are not going to know until next August, really, I guess until next September, if that has actually worked, if it is something that can get LSU over the hump into that 12-team field next year in 2025. As great as the number one class is in the transfer portal, they still have a few positions that they got to hit on. And we saw Ole Miss sign the number one class in the country last year, and then they go 9-3, not much changes. Meanwhile, Indiana signs a 20-something ranked class, and they are able to flip everything around. So you got to hit on these guys, and we just don't know really that LSU has hit on players at all these positions. And it's going to be really the thing that defines this season. Because a lot of these guys, I was looking at it yesterday or maybe the day before and kind of just guessing in my own head, like, I mean, I'm pretty sure 12 of the 14 are going to have like major roles on this team next year. Michael Van Buren probably won't because he'll be the backup quarterback to Garrett. And then I don't know that Destin Hill will have like a huge role necessarily, like Nick Anderson and Varian Brown for sure. Destin is a little bit more of a question mark. He just hasn't played a ton. He's been injured and all that stuff. So it's like, okay, everybody else, I think, is probably a contributor next season. So you've got to make sure that you've hit on these guys and that the evaluations were sound. That's kind of my 2 cents on it at this point. Because, yeah, they've hit their needs. They've gotten highly ranked players, but they need to make sure. But it doesn't just mean it's going to translate to wins automatically.
Well, and here's the thing, too. I don't want to hear a darn thing about these are the guys that Baker and company brought in, right? Like, I mean, you went out and got 4 defensive linemen. 4. You only play 4. So, I mean, I don't think you want anybody to be depth pieces. Maybe Sadir Mitchell in the role of like on certain downs. Okay, I understand it. But there are going to be games that I think that they go to some form of zero nose with his ass. I mean, like this kid's what, 6'6", 350? I mean, put him in the middle. Make him be moved. I mean, like that, please, dear Lord. But I'm with you. You brought in a lot, and you talked about some other pieces that need to be hit. But I got to ask you: is there anybody in this portal class that you look at and you're like, man, that looking into this kid, I really like this addition? Has there been anybody like that for you?
A couple come to mind. Barry Brown, right off the top of my head. I mean, that guy, he is so
No.
fast. He is so fast. The way that he moves in space, and you can see like why there's the thinking that, oh man, if he can play with a high level quarterback, which I think Garrett is, especially if he can just cut down on a few of those turnovers, man, like this guy is a deep threat. LSU added, has a lot of speed, as we know, and especially, I mean, he pops though. I mean, what he can do in the kick return game. I mean, he's been good for at least one kick return touchdown a season. And now, can LSU keep that or a sudden streak going? All of a sudden, everybody's returning kickoff returns, but he adds to that. So Barry Brown comes to mind with his speed at receiver, what he can be with a quarterback like Garrett down the field. Nick Anderson fits into that too. Let's see, other ones that there's been so many of them. I'm trying to sift through them in my head as to like who really pops. Also, Mansour Delane.
Delane, yeah.
Delane. Yeah, I think he's going to be a really good player for them next year. Just the experience, the proven experience.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever somebody hits the portal who is actually like already put it out there that they can play, it's not just sort of like a question mark and can they develop kind of thing. Those are usually the first ones that jump out to me, and he would be another one. But there's so many that you could choose from. That I wouldn't blame anybody else for being like, oh, well, I think more about Braylon Moore or Josh Thompson. Like those are guys who are going to be starters next year too. So it's just harder to evaluate O-line tape for me than it is like watching a corner or a receiver.
Right. We literally were talking about this last night about Barry and Brown. Wilson, if Garrett can get protection, I feel like what they did was nothing ain't going to change. He still wants to push the ball down the field. We're going to go give you 2 options, and really you got 4 options. If you want to toss the pill around, Wilson, I felt like they went for broke. Really is because if Chris Hilton, God forbid, Chris Hilton stays healthy, I feel like you know what you can get from him now. Like when he's actually okay and he can actually go. Aaron Anderson, Nick Anderson. I get excited about it, to be honest with you, if they can protect. But the thing is, too, I don't know if they're going to be able to run the ball, right? Like, I mean, this has been Wilson, Baylor was 87th in the country coming in run defense. You couldn't bust a grape with anything. So that's the only thing that worries me offensively. I think the sky limit for them offensively is really high.
Yeah, I mean, and it's probably going to be kind of a pass to set up the run type offense. If what we saw in the bowl game can translate into, like you said, they've added all this firepower at receiver. But also, I mean, using some of those running backs in the passing game. I mean, Caden can catch the ball in the backfield. So can Harlan Berry and JT Lindsey, I'm sure, can too. I mean, like, the other thing is, though, with the run game, that's another one of those sort of like unknowns. It's how much can Braylon Moore and Josh Thompson, like, are they road graders? Can they lean on people?
Josh Thompson certainly is.
Yeah, we need to see it against SEC teams, right? So it's like, can they do that against SEC D lines? And can Cohen Eccles or who was talked about as being really physical? Miles Frazier was talking about him at the bowl practices, just being somebody who's really physical. And we saw him get some reps in. Can he maybe take a step forward? Is he somebody who can really strike someone at the point of attack? They just need that in the offensive line going into next year. Carius Kern, maybe he can do that too. Can he play as a freshman? So there's a lot of question marks on the run game in that regard. But I think it all comes down to whether or not this offensive line can run block better than we saw them this year, because that was the issue, right? I mean, they just could not strike people and move people off the line of scrimmage enough.
When I felt like even at times, like even in that bowl game, I felt like Durham. I'm not trying to call him out. I felt like he was tiptoeing a little bit, like, hey, man, you're kind of moving a little, like, is it toes? Like, it didn't feel like he was explosive the way that we had seen him. I want to ask you about this, too, defensively. Look, man, I don't know if this kid can rush the passer, but I know that LSU has a problem with getting after a quarterback in the run game, and I've seen Jack Pyburn absolutely obliterate dudes. Like, go full Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, and obliterate dudes. He's got me more excited about football. I watch him. Like, I watched the whole interview with Florida with him, and he's like, no, I love football. I want to play football. I love football. Like, I love those dudes, man. I'm really intrigued to see a guy like that defensively.
I asked one source after Pyburn signed, what's he like? And the response was just violent. And one source on staff said that. And that's what you see on tape. I mean, he will blow people up at the line of scrimmage at the point of attack. And I think he's going to be really good at, like, setting the edge and be really good in run defense. It's just, can he develop as a pass rusher? Does LSU need him to develop as a pass rusher? You've got, Peyton and Butler and Gabe Relaford as a second-year player. Like, do you need that? I feel like you probably need to bring him along a little bit more so he can be on the field, as a more of a three-down player. But he at least does that. Yeah, he can get after, and Perkins, obviously, if they actually use him that way. But Pyburn's in that regard, I think instantly gives you that. Somebody who can set the edge, who's going to have a mindset that you really like, a physical, violent mindset that gives you something defensively there. And then the other two as edge rushers, as pass rushers, we'll see kind of how they can do, because those are two guys, with Butler and Peyton, who, again, some question marks. They haven't been like super duper prolific. Peyton has shown more flashes, but it's got to be consistent over the course of an entire season. Can you take that step under Kevin Peoples is what else he needs him to do. And that's sort of like what we were talking about earlier. It's like you've signed some highly rated guys, some guys with potential. You've got to get them to meet that next year for you to actually, for all these guys to kind of hit and for everything to pan out.
And it brings up the part you said, well, and obviously Harold Perkins. Nobody sent nickel PFF pressure than LSU. No one. Not in the SEC. 50% of dropbacks, Major Burns was coming on third downs. 50% of the time. As balanced as you can be. Man, what's up? What do you think about Perkins coming back? And I'm already assuming that he's playing star, but I'm just assuming that. But I guess your thoughts on Perkins coming back here.
I just want to see him unleashed, like, just so badly. I think everybody who's watched LSU the last few years does. And and this is just, I don't have like a stake in the fight or anything. It's just from watching that as a freshman, it's like you just so badly want to see that. And for him, because he just feels like, obviously the injury this year bottles him up in a way that, but even as a sophomore, he just felt bottled up and never really fully unleashed. I just want to see him get after the passer. And for him coming back, I think it was the right decision. He wasn't going to be a first-round pick. He might not even have been a top 50 pick. And a guy with his athleticism and speed and potential, I think it was probably the right move for him to come back and try, at least give himself the chance to try to establish himself as a top 50 pick and maybe even as a first rounder. Some of the things that draft analysts were telling me after Perkins got injured was that maybe he could still be a top 50 pick because of those athletic qualities. But there was a lot of questions, even from the NFL, about where exactly do you put this guy and the injury. Like, how much is he going to be able to do the pre-draft process? And that was a way back. But I think some of those questions about position still apply, and maybe LSU and maybe Harold himself can kind of clear some of that up. All right, finally have a really good season at one spot, and maybe this is a maybe that's been lingering for a few years now, but maybe that can kind of finally help him take that step as a draft prospect and really help LSU's defense and make him, as we know, he athletically is capable of being one of the top players in the country.
For 4 weeks after he got hurt, every night in this show, somebody would come in here and say the defense is better without him. And then you gave up 275 rushing yards to A&M, and then you gave up 311 rushing yards to Alabama. And I'm like, we sure? Are we positive? I feel the exact – it's not that you had a stake in the fight. I think everybody wants that exact same thing. I don't think that you say the words Harold Perkins, go. I think everybody's first statement is exactly what you just said. Unleash him. Well, however that is. Well, you sent Major Burns after the quarterback more than anybody. Well, shit. Let's go do that. Let's go get after it. And look, here's the interesting thing that I think what's up with Harold on this, if he moves there, potentially. Tackles don't fan out to star nickelbacks ever. They would have to do something to game plan against him for that. He'd be going up against running backs and tight ends. If he can beat OTs in the SEC, he can beat running backs and tight ends in this league, which could bring something interesting. All right, one more for you here. Well,
yeah, no, it's a great point. You match him up against guys who aren't going to be as good at blockers and dealing with him off the edge. Yeah, no, it's a great point.
Why wouldn't I? You only asked Major Burns to go man-on-man coverage, like, I think, again, it was like 8% of the time. All right, that sounds great. I will take Perkin in man-to-man coverage 8% of the time. That means you're going to be in zone on the other, and you're going to be blitzing him on the other. So Please, dear Lord, for 90% of the time, put him in zone coverage or blitz his ass. Please, dear Lord. I mean, that's just that you were doing. I felt like you were doing it with the wrong person. I saw Major Burns get 2 sacks against Jackson Dart. God forbid what Harold Perkins havoc could bring. That's all I'm saying. Now it seems like I have a stake in the fight, right? Like I'm being passionate about it. All right, last one, Wilson. There's a position group that every single night, Wilson, on the show that keeps being brought up. Safety.
I was going to say, I wonder if I can guess what it is.
Okay. Well, there's 2 really. Do you want to know what the other one is?
Oh, offensive line, offensive tackle.
Brian Kelly told you in the interview, correct, that he wanted to go after another offensive line. Let me go there. This kid from Louisville, Mills, entered the portal. I know you asked Brian Kelly, do you think that was like when he said what he said, how did you feel like, hey, I want another offensive lineman, or like, yeah, we might take another O lineman, we'll see. Like, how did he respond to you in that?
I'll clear that up for anyone who maybe doesn't quite who has questions about it. Yeah, he had answered something about Josh Thompson, and I said, do y'all still have any interest in getting another offensive lineman? And he goes, yes.
Okay.
That was the extent of his answer. It was matter of fact, it was firm. They are still looking for offensive linemen in the transfer portal. Specifically, I think, like you said, an offensive tackle. I mean, that's not specifically coming from Kelly, but based on what they've added so far, Thompson is a guy who could maybe play guard or tackle if he needs to kick out the tackle. But I feel like, this is my own personal view of it, he probably would be better suited as a guard for you. And then you go and find another tackle to compete with Weston Davis and some of these other guys who can maybe take a step as going into next year, but you get someone a little bit more proven to make sure that you aren't caught flat-footed at that position.
Why didn't we see Weston Davis against Baylor, in your opinion?
I'm not sure. I mean, I don't know. I mean, obviously Miles Frazier coming back, deciding to play in that game, put somebody in at right tackle. But why he didn't see any reps at all, I really don't know.
It's just odd. Like 5 stars carry different weight, and everybody understands that. So that's why it was interesting. The other one was safety. Wilson, Sage, Ryan, and Major Burns are gone, and I think that position is in trouble. Maybe I'm wrong. I think it could be in trouble. When you look at it, how do you feel about it?
Yeah, they need to go and add players, and they got to hit on them. That is definitely a position where, like, you look defensively. Okay, you've added at you feel, I think, fairly good. Or at least you know what you have. And no, you don't even know what you have necessarily. But, like, okay, you've addressed the defensive line. You feel really good about what you got at linebacker. Corner, even, I think, is pretty solid. I mean, DJ Pickett coming in, some of these other guys they've added. Delane could maybe be able to play safety, but yeah, I mean, you've got Jordan Gilbert, who wasn't great this year. Toviano moving back there. Deshaun Spears. Yeah, you're thin at the position, and you don't have any proven difference maker. And so, yeah, you got to go and address it. And look, even if they don't do it right this month, then you got to get it in the spring. But they do. You probably need to hit on it this month, as we saw last year. The spring is much less certain. You don't exactly know who's going in. Not as many people go in, and then the price gets driven up. And so they need to hit on them, and they need to hit on them over the next couple of weeks. They probably need 2.
I think they need 2. I mean, and look, maybe because you've been spending money, maybe you're more prepared than what you did this past spring. But I remember coming out here every single night, my happy-go-lucky ass, talking about this defensive lineman, this defensive lineman, this defensive lineman, that defensive lineman. And it just, like, goodness gracious, and then Brian Kelly going out there and saying, what he had said emphatically, we're not in the business of paying players. Well, funny how a year changes things, I mean, like, so I guess we'll see. All right, Wilson, thank you so much, man. This is always fun to have you on here. I know they know, but just in case they don't, I know your social media handle's there, but where everybody can catch your work, I catch in on your guys' show when you are doing it from time to time. Tell them everything that you guys are doing.
Yeah, obviously over at advocate.com, you can subscribe for all of our LSU coverage. Football, we're not writing about football every single day right now, but if you're interested in women's basketball, baseball, we got daily coverage of every sport on campus, really, gymnastics too, everything. So find us over there. And yeah, our YouTube channel, LSU Tigers on NOLA. We got our podcast going up over there twice a week. And then for more football coverage, we'll have it all as it comes. So every sport on campus, we got you covered. Go find us over there.
I'm not gonna lie. When Koki fired out a baseball tweet yesterday or whenever it was, I was like,
"'Tis the season."
Oh boy, here we go. Valentine's. So Wilson, what do we do here? Opening day's on Valentine's Day. Like, what do you do? Do you miss opening day? Do you take the lady out? Like, what are you supposed to do here?
I don't know what others should. Well, others should take your wife or girlfriend or fiance out. It's one baseball game. You'll be okay. Take care of everything at home. It's okay. And luckily for me, I'm in the position of not having to cover baseball every day anymore. And so my wife is very grateful for that because we will go and enjoy a nice dinner.
I think I've been married now. Facebook tells me that I've been dating my wife for a decade. So I think we're going to. Thank you. I think we're going to be doing the exact same. I know what I do and don't need to do. That is for sure. All right, Wilson, thank you so much, man. We'll talk soon. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, y'all.
All right.
Have a good one.
That's Wilson Alexander.